Let's talk about the FDA decision. So
Yeah.
from what we know, right, they voted down that there should be third boosters for everybody, basically. Am I understanding correctly what happened?
So you got to be a little careful about that, Allison. What this was the acronym is the VRBAC, the Vaccine Related Biologics Advisory Committee, basically. And this is a committee of academics and outside thought leaders that are not part of the FDA. They also have, when they convene a VRBAC meeting, they have a public comment. So, for instance, Steve Kirsch put in a slide deck. This is the committee that the FDA elected, in really unprecedented, never known them to do this before. They elected that they would not convene this committee for the evaluation of the licensure of the BioNTech Comirnaty product. The FDA determined that they would not convene this committee because they believed that the licensure was not controversial. There was nothing controversial to have an outside committee opine on regarding that Comirnaty vaccine. I submit that is not true. But for whatever reason, myself and others, perhaps having objected to the logic that we should just proceed with the boosters, they decided that they needed to convene this committee this time and have them comment on whether or not they should proceed with the boosters. And I'd just like to read a quote from one of the key committee members, Dr. Chatterjee, who stated, quote, "This should demonstrate to the public that the members of this committee are independent of the FDA and that, in fact, we do bring our voices to the table when we're asked to serve on this committee." I think that essentially was a bit of snark to the effect that they were not included in the prior meeting, but that they're showing the public in this meeting that they do have an independent voice, and they aren't just going to follow the party line and comport with whatever Pfizer or the Biden administration wants or Tony Fauci. But what's important to remember is that they are merely an advisory committee. The FDA on Friday next could well state, well, that's all fine and good, but we're going to go ahead and do it anyhow. They have that right. So this committee voted overwhelmingly to disagree with the position that Pfizer was trying to advance and that the FDA seemed to be endorsing and that Dr. Fauci and the Biden administration endorsed. And they said, no, you don't have the data. And to the extent that we do have the data, it does not look favorable for this strategy. And we do think that it's compelling enough for those 65 and over and of certain high risk groups to proceed at risk, basically, with the third jab. But for everybody else, we can't endorse that. It was I hope that and this is key. I think this may have been the event that forced them to convene the committee. Is two of the leading personnel at the FDA responsible for these vaccines resigned. Their 30 plus year history of government employee work because they objected to this push to advance the third jab with little scientific justification. So for whatever reason, we finally have a group that is willing to break with the narrative to a modest extent. But I think given how much suppression and propaganda and everything we've had, this is a major advance in terms of trying to get towards science-based medicine.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because you have this dissenting. Am I calling it a vote? Is that a correct?
It was a vote, but it's non-binding. It's the committee has made This outside committee has made a voted recommendation
I
that
see.
was
Okay.
overwhelming, that you
I
shouldn't
see.
do this, but the FDA can elect to accept or reject that.
Okay. Got it. So, so you get this dissenting vote, but at the same time, I think we have to wait and see what happens with the FDA, right? Because to me, like, it would be easy to say, "Hey, look, there seems to be some autonomy here and ability to go against the grain of the Biden administration." But to do that, do you have to quit? I mean, because is that what the lesson is with these officials who did? So, because it seems like if there was actually ability to have dissenting thought on this, you wouldn't have to resign. If that's in fact what
Well
happened.
put. Yeah, well put. Um, the difference is that Dr. Gruber and her colleague were longstanding full-time employees, Phil Kraus, and in the government series. So these people are typically very sensitive to their pensions, and they're there because they like the security. In large, often that's the case, and they like to be able to influence public policy. And they felt that it was necessary to step out and resign their positions. That's a major hit. Because they objected to the third jab policy in the absence of sufficient data. And is that what it takes? I think it is, Allison. I think that if you're in a position of being a leader in the government right now within HHS, if you go against basically the policy of Tony Fauci, uh, it's pretty much get along and go along or leave.
It's interesting because when you hear the president speak recently about all of this, and I remember it really stuck out to me when he said, "I understand your anger." I mean, there was a lot of direct and indirect language in that I perceived to be very divisive on the us versus them, vaccinated versus unvaccinated, battle lines that continue to be drawn. And to me, that was like that wasn't quelling these concerns, it was stoking that fire.
A group of international physicians and scientists came together in Rome from literally all over the world, both virtually and physically, and spoke about alternative treatment strategies and presented the data on thousands and thousands and thousands of patients treated with these alternative treatment strategies in Peru and in various countries in Africa, and Poland has had great success with their own protocols, and Canada, etc. We're all asking this question that you're asking: why? Why are we seeing this irrational, concerted position now at the summit? Because we spoke in the Senate and we had a sponsor, one of the senators. The rules were that we could not speak about the vaccines because that's such a hot topic. We certainly spoke about it when we weren't on the podium. There are layers and layers of things that don't make sense. With the data that came out with this FDA VRBPAC committee meeting, in which you had the committee willing to ask some harder questions than the FDA and the CDC have been willing to ask, a lot of key information came out. And for instance, there's a presentation there that the logic there that there's significantly more myocarditis happening in the up to 30-year-old range. We now know very clearly that particularly from Israeli and UK data, that we're having very large numbers of in terms of the fraction of people that are ending up in the hospital with severe disease or death. Many of those are vaccinated persons. So it's become abundantly clear, and the data are in, the vaccines are not providing very good protection against infection. They're, you pick your study, it's between 40% and 80%, but it's more along the 40 to 50% protection from infection range. They don't protect you once you're infected from having virus replication. Those levels are about the same between people who were unvaccinated and those who were vaccinated. And they're not stopping transmission. So the whole vaccine passport, vaccine mandate logic underlying logic has fallen apart. It doesn't withstand any scrutiny at all. If you mandate that all those healthcare workers in those health systems, which is what Biden administration has done, they've said that if you don't get your healthcare system vaccinated up to a certain level in terms of the providers, then you're no longer going to be able to be compensated using Medicare, Medicaid. So we're going to hit you directly financially where you live if you don't comply. But the logic has always been tenuous that somehow we could vaccinate our way out of this outbreak with these leaky, imperfect vaccines. It's now abundantly clear. On top of that, we have the evolution of Delta and these other variants that escape vaccines. And this gives rise to the observation that the universal vaccination is actually, it's the vaccinees that are selecting for these new escape variants. And then, as if that wasn't enough, you have the problem that we don't have enough vaccine to go around, and the people that really need it are the people in all over the world, in a wide range of nations and cultures that have these high-risk characteristics of being the elders, obese, immunodeficiency, etc. So from the standpoint of equity, what's happening is kind of a hoarding of resources by the developed world and a failure to share that with the rest of the world. So we're basically messaging that it's okay for us to watch the elders in emerging economy nations pass away for lack of vaccine, because we insist on administering a vaccine to our entire population, including those that don't need it, those for whom their risk is a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a percent, which is, folks like you, Allison, frankly, younger, fit, healthy individuals, which describes most of the population. So the logic of these mandates is just not there anymore. It can't get us to herd immunity. It's not the way to get back to recovery economically and socially. But they're dug in and willing to use what usually we think of as repulsive, repugnant methods of these authoritarian mandates. I do not understand the political logic. I think they're just going to get beaten like a drum in the next major elections. I think we're, if things stay like this, I'm going to, say Ron DeSantis is just smacking his lips over this behavior. This looks like it's a perfect setup for him, and I don't see how this is not advancing public health. It's not advancing recovery. It's not advancing their political agenda. I don't get it. And a lot of people don't get it. And so then we're left speculating, intelligent people left with a bunch of, this doesn't make sense. They go to conspiracy land.
After watching some of my videos, you might say, I need a drink. And good news, you can now have a glass of wine and support my channel at the same time. Check out AllisonWith1LWinePromo.com, AllisonWith1LWinePromo.com. For some of my favorite Argentinian Malbecs, you get 50% off the wine itself and 50% off shipping. One of the new bottles comes from the oldest vineyard in Argentina. They are new bottles from the last 3 that were in my promo code, so check them out if you got the last 3. No filtering, no dyes, and no excess chemicals. Again, AllisonWith1LWinePromo.com.